Bloodborne wasn't born from doubt. It was born under pressure. Back in the Demon's Souls and Dark Souls days, Miyazaki said everyone thought, this will never sell. But by Bloodborne, everything changed. Expectations were sky high. For the first time, FromSoftware worked in an environment of faith, not skepticism, and that pressure actually made development happier. Bloodborne was huge, one of the biggest Japanese-developed games of its time, but Miyazaki refused to make it a Western-style AAA blockbuster. He said Japanese studios couldn't outdo the West by imitation. So, FromSoftware's answer was to stay true to their own identity, not chase trends. Miyazaki explained that Bloodborne wasn't made to be a horror game. The fear and dread were used as psychological tools, not genre goals. He said that by pushing players into terror, their victories felt bigger and more meaningful. Fear wasn't the point. The triumph after fear was. Miyazaki said developing Bloodborne on PS4 was surprisingly smooth. Compared to the nightmare of working on early PS3 hardware for Armored Core 4, the PS4 felt clean and compliant. That easier workflow helped Bloodborne come together with the technical and artistic polish earlier Souls games couldn't achieve. Bloodborne was vague and dreamlike for a very personal reason. Miyazaki wanted to recreate the fill-in-the-blanks stories he loved as a child. That's why Yharnam's lore was never spelled out. Characters spoke in riddles, and everything felt arcane and hidden. The game was designed to feel like a book you could never fully understand, just like the ones young Miyazaki read. Bloodborne's themes were built around one idea: the true nature of beasts. Early in development, the team kept asking, what hides inside a beast? And what would it feel like to become one yourself? Those questions shaped Yharnam's story and the player's own slow, unsettling transformation. Miyazaki once said, Bloodborne is a lot drearier than my previous games. He meant it, not just in looks, but in emotion. He mixed in what he finds beautiful: prayer, despair, and insanity. It's one of the few times he's admitted this, that to him, suffering itself can be beautiful. That's the heart of Bloodborne's tone. Bloodborne wasn't just made to be hard, it was made to feel like survival. Miyazaki said the goal was for players to fear every enemy and feel like they were fighting for their lives. That's why the blood, the aggression, the chaos, all of it was designed to make every victory feel earned through fear and adrenaline. He wanted you to finish a fight and say, that was insane. I can't believe I survived. Bloodborne's faster combat was built around the idea of hunting your nightmare. Miyazaki intentionally moved away from Dark Souls' defensive style. He wanted players to feel like fearless hunters, so the team removed shields, sped up attacks, and introduced the regain system. Every mechanic was designed to reward bravery and punish hesitation, pushing players to fight forward, not back. The doll's comforting gestures, they were never Miyazaki's idea. One of the designers quietly added them near the end of development and said, "Hey Miyazaki, check this out." Miyazaki loved it instantly. He said he often struggles to create heroines, but the doll became one of his favorites. Bloodborne's balance testing wasn't just about difficulty, it was about fun. Miyazaki personally playtested for hours, even with Sony's testers. But he didn't take every suggestion. If something wasn't fun to play, he scrapped it, no matter how good the concept sounded. He only listened when players felt bored, frustrated, or out of place. The nightmares in Bloodborne aren't just dreams. They might be reality. When asked if Yharnam is real or just a dream, Miyazaki only said, "Yharnam truly is a nightmare-like world. But is it actually a nightmare, or was it?" He left the answer to the players, depending on the ending you find. Miyazaki says watching fans theorize is part of the fun after development. Miyazaki said Bloodborne was full of challenges, a true fresh start for FromSoftware. It was their first PS4 game, built completely from scratch with a new engine, tone, and pace. He called it a massive creative leap, but the goal never changed: to make games that feel satisfying and fun for players who truly love games. Even with its Gothic horror vibe, Bloodborne was always meant to be the spiritual successor to Demon's Souls. Bloodborne was built on the DNA of demons' souls. Miyazaki even said it acted as a spiritual successor because it carried over demons' souls level design, its hub-style structure, and the same style of interconnected exploration. He explained that Bloodborne's upper maps were designed using the exact principles he used for Boletaria. Bloodborne was his way of continuing the Demon's Souls philosophy without owning the Demon's Souls IP. Miyazaki kept a secret dev diary during Bloodborne, a private forum where he wrote daily essays about things like the mind's eye, blood, and beast transformations. He admitted most of it was meaningless stuff that never made it into the game, but it helped him shape Bloodborne's world of obsession and decay. Bloodborne actually began when Sony approached FromSoftware right after Dark Souls Prepare to Die Edition wrapped. Miyazaki pitched it immediately as their first true next-gen project, a brand new world built for the PS4. The Gothic horror and fast, aggressive combat were ideas he'd been dreaming about for years. Bloodborne wasn't a sequel. It was a long-awaited vision Miyazaki finally brought to life. Bloodborne was designed to feel uniquely inhospitable. Miyazaki described his worlds as hostile, archaic, and impossible to fully understand, and Bloodborne pushed those ideas even further. By removing defensive safety nets and amplifying uncertainty, the game was built to keep players uneasy from the very first step. Did you know Hidetaka Miyazaki likes making his games hard to understand? He joked that he keeps a virtual pendulum in his head. One game mysterious, the next more approachable. Demon's Souls was inscrutable, Dark Souls was more approachable, and now Bloodborne. He says he loves making players shine a light into dark places, and if it's too confusing, that just means he stretched too far. Babies are lures for gods. That's how Miyazaki described the origin of Murgo. He revealed that in Bloodborne, special babies are offered to attract the Great Ones, beings who lost their own children and seek new life. He even based it on real biology. The stronger a species, the fewer offspring it has. That single idea shaped Bloodborne's entire cosmic horror. Miyazaki names everything in his games, except the games themselves. He admits, "I choose all the names. I'm a bit of a naming nerd." He studies etymology, sound, and meaning for every detail. But when it comes to titles, he says he's terrible at it and has never had a good experience naming a game. Bloodborne's horror style was actually fueled by Miyazaki's real-world travels. After becoming studio president, he finally got to visit new places, and he used those trips as reference material. For Bloodborne's Gothic look, he personally visited Romania and the Czech Republic, soaking in their architecture to help shape the streets of Yharnam. The heart of Bloodborne's design is simple, the feeling of fighting for your life. Miyazaki said, "We wanted players to feel like they're clawing their way out of danger. That's why there's no pause, no shields, and faster healing. Bloodborne isn't a power fantasy, it's panic survival. Every mechanic, from gun parries to the regain system, fuels that rush of adrenaline." Miyazaki's favorite Bloodborne weapon? The threaded cane. He called it a touch of class, and even admitted they secretly priced it higher because they were playing favorites. His favorite boss? Rom the vacuous spider. He said she was oddly cute. Only Miyazaki could call a cosmic nightmare cute. Miyazaki admitted he was terrified before Bloodborne launched. He said he was 30% excited and 70% freaking out. For him, the time between finishing a game and release was always the worst, because there was nothing left he could change. Even as one of the most celebrated directors in gaming, he still battled doubt and anxiety right before his games hit the world. Bloodborne's Gothic look actually started with one idea: guns. Miyazaki wanted firearms in the combat, so the team searched for a time period where guns felt primitive but stylish. That choice naturally led them to Victorian-era horror, and the entire aesthetic of Bloodborne formed around it. Miyazaki said Bloodborne's brutal world reflected how he saw real life, harsh and unkind. He never wanted to make games that were soft or comforting. Instead, he mirrored the cruelty of nature and society, so players could find meaning by pushing through it. It was one of his clearest explanations for why his games felt the way they did. Miyazaki said Yharnam was designed like a painted world, not a realistic city. He treated it as an artistically crafted nightmare, stylized, symbolic, and dreamlike. That's why Bloodborne's world felt surreal, blending reality, dreams, and madness into one haunting space. Miyazaki never hated defensive play, not even shield users. Despite the memes, he actually appreciated defensive builds in past Souls games. Bloodborne's lack of shields wasn't a punishment or a jab at cautious players. It was simply a new experiment, built around speed, aggression, and forward momentum. Yosefka was supposed to live, but the team shut it down. Miyazaki said he tried to write a version where she survives, but the rest of the studio refused. "Let's just say I tried, but everyone was against it." He laughed. He even joked that keeping her dead was a safety measure from his own staff. So yeah, her death wasn't Miyazaki's first choice. Miyazaki revealed that Bloodborne's tone was heavily inspired by Bram Stoker's Dracula. As a kid, he loved the cold, clammy atmosphere before Van Helsing even showed up. He joked, "I was an odd child, wasn't I?" But that early horror obsession shaped the world that became Bloodborne. Bloodborne's stunning Gothic look was only possible because of the PS4. Miyazaki said, "We can finally make these elaborate designs a reality with the power of the PS4. The next-gen hardware directly shaped the art direction. He saw Gothic architecture and intricate detail as a way to show off that power. That's why Bloodborne looks so much richer and denser than Dark Souls." Miyazaki said Bloodborne's world was built as a mix of Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. It used interconnected zones like Dark Souls, but a central hub like Demon's Souls through the hunter's dream. He explained that this hybrid design made Yharnam feel both seamless and structured, taking the best of both worlds. Miyazaki once joked that real-life CEOs inspired some of Bloodborne's NPC enemies. After meeting tons of company presidents in his new role, he said, "They were such weird people. I used some of them as enemy characters." So those bizarre, unsettling NPCs in Bloodborne, they might have been based on actual executives he met in real life. Miyazaki said Bloodborne's difficulty isn't just about numbers. You can't just crank it up forever. The real challenge comes from emotion. He wanted every fight to feel like a sweaty, desperate struggle for survival, not just harder enemies. That's why Bloodborne uses the regain system. It pushes you to stay in the fight, not hide behind a shield. Bloodborne's Victorian horror wasn't just for style, it was technical. Miyazaki said the era's gloomy towns and Gothic buildings were chosen to show off the PS4's power. It's not based on London, but on remote, decaying villages of the time. And the first thing he wanted players to feel? The atmosphere of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Miyazaki defined Bloodborne's core themes before development even began. He listed 3: exploring the unknown, curiosity and fear in equal measure, the feeling of fighting for your life, that raw, visceral danger, and new online elements, players connected through mystery and discovery. These ideas came before the story or mechanics. They built the foundation of Bloodborne. Bloodborne's horror was built on one idea: Gothic being devoured by Lovecraft. Miyazaki said, "Gothic horror is based in reality. Cthulhu horror erodes that reality." So Yharnam starts grounded, a dark Gothic city, and slowly decays into cosmic madness as the Great Ones seep in. That shift, from real to unreal, is Bloodborne's true horror. The Beast Plague was part of Bloodborne's story from the very beginning. Miyazaki described it early on as a town famous for its medicine, now struck by a plague of the beast. That single idea, a medical city, a spreading curse, and humans turning into beasts, was there from the first drafts. Fun fact, Plague of the Beast was the original name before Scourge of the Beast. The fake Iosefka was actually one of Miyazaki's favorite heroines, but no one on the team believed him. He even said he felt a little sad when they brushed her off. Miyazaki loves the scholarly investigator type. Characters like Sage Freak, Big Hat Logan, and Master Willem, truth seekers who lose themselves to forbidden knowledge. He says he feels sorry they never get the love they deserve. Bloodborne's setting was inspired by Victorian London and old plague folklore. Miyazaki pulled from real history, but only lightly. He never copied anything directly. Instead, he blended Gothic architecture, mass hysteria, and European myths into a world that felt familiar but unsettling. That's why Yharnam seemed both historical and dreamlike, a haunting mix of memories, not a real place. Miyazaki's entire design philosophy can be summed up in one line. The essence of games lies in giving meaning to your actions. Every boss, shortcut, and discovery in Souls and Bloodborne is built around that feeling of achievement. He even says map design itself is a form of joy. That rush you feel when the world loops back on itself? That's not an accident. That's Miyazaki's design religion.